Welcome to a wonderful evening of an intimate evening of poetic and creative dialogue. Stained hands, the stickiness of touch, performative reading and dialogue with Ruth Wallen. We're presenting this virtually through Zoom and WEAD and in person at the 109 Gallery in historic downtown Chickamauga. How do you pronounce that correctly?
Chickamauga.
Chickamauga, Georgia.
Mhm.
The presentation is in collaboration with the exhibition, which we've worked on together, Bodies and Borders, the Ecology of Consent. Ruth is a multimedia artist and writer whose work is dedicated to encouraging dialogue around ecological and social justice. Ruth will share intimate conversations with a girdled tree whose bark has been help me, Ruth. Circumferentially
Yeah,
removed
that's fine.
as part of an effort to prevent forest fires. Though through these exchanges, she will reflect on how to touch and be touched by a tree in the forest, the power of fire, the legacy of settler colonialism, and the ongoing ecological degradation of our times. A little about WEAD, Women Eco Artist Dialogue. It was founded in 1996, and it's a volunteer-run cohort of female-identified visual artists, writers, curators, art historians, researchers, scientists, and others interested in highlighting the intersection of art and ecological issues. And I'm Mary White, the current WEAD chair. We have just created a printed catalog of the exhibition, which is available to order on our website, and the link is in the chat, and we'll put it there again for those of you who just joined. We would like to thank our sponsors, California Council of the Arts, Alameda County Commission for the Arts, the City of Berkeley, Civic Arts, and Blick Art Supplies. The land acknowledgement for WEAD is in Berkeley, California. WEAD's Berkeley office sits on the territory of the Wichen, the unceded and ancestral land of the Chichoneo-speaking Ohlone, the successors of the sovereign Verona tribe of Alameda County, near one of the largest shell mounds in the Bay Area, like 4 blocks away. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and other familiar descendants of the Verona band. We recognize the Muwekma Ohlone tribe, who are campaigning to become federally recognized, the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone, who are researching and revitalizing and preserving Ramaytush Ohlone history and culture, and the Confederated Villages of Lejeune and the Segorite Land Trust, who are actually in our neighborhood, have just returned 2 spaces back to Indigenous stewardship. Now, I think Ruth and Leah would both like to give their land acknowledgements. Ruth?
So I'm coming to you from San Diego, California, which is the unceded territory of the Kumeyaay, who are still very active in stewarding this region. And I'd like to read a land acknowledgement, just at least part of one from Boulder, Colorado, because this whole presentation that I'll be sharing is from Boulder, Colorado. So this is from the city of Colorado. Boulder acknowledges that it's the ancestral homelands and unceded territory of indigenous people who have traversed, lived in, and stewarded lands in Boulder Valley since time immemorial. These indigenous nations include the Dide, Apache, Hinnonoitin, Arapaho, Tetsits Het'sahese, Cheyenne, Numunu, Comanche, Gayegu, Kiowa, Carix, Equirix, Pawnee, Shoshone, Osite, Sakowen, Sioux, and Nushu, Ute. We honor and respect the peoples of these nations and their ancestors. We also recognize that Indigenous knowledge, oral histories, and languages handed down through generations have shaped profound cultural and spiritual connections with Boulder area lands and ecosystems, connections that are sustained and celebrated to this day. Thank you.
Thank you. Leah, did you want to read yours as well now, or?
I will read mine. I will want to say that this was co-written with the local Native American Rights Foundation here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So they helped write this and form it in the language that they wanted to share. So, acknowledgement of the tribes, people, community, histories, and contemporary realities of those whose land this gallery and project is situated upon. Chickamauga, Georgia, land of the Cherokee East and the Yuchi and Muskie. Chattanooga, Tennessee, land of the Muskie, the Cherokee East. And then I have also in the chat, if you want to look further, support the Native Americans' Right Foundation that helps tribes to safeguard their land rights, water rights, hunting, fishing, and gathering rights, resource rights, and environmental rights. As times are changing, it is most important that we do some part in recognizing the value of human life. If you would like to help support Indigenous communities, then follow the link in the chat. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, just a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. We'll be recording this presentation. Please keep your audio muted during the presentations, and a host may mute you if there's extra noise. If you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat, and we'll have questions and discussion afterwards and dialogue. I think we'll do one full session with the recording and the questions and answers. All right, so now just a brief introduction to Ruth. Ruth is a multimedia artist and writer whose work is dedicated to encouraging dialogue among educational social justice. After working as an environmental scientist, she turned to art to pose questions beyond disciplinary boundaries, address values informing environmental policy, and contribute to the developing field of ecological art. She creates interactive installations, nature walks, websites, artist books, and performance lectures. Her critical writing addresses ecological art and race and gender and visual culture. Committed to student-centered learning, she served as chair and core faculty in the MFA in Interdisciplinary Arts Program at Goddard College for many years. So, and if you want to see more, there's a lot more if you go to her website. So with no more ado, we'd like to introduce Ruth.
So thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Leah, for putting all of this together. So I'll be sharing my screen in just a moment. I will give a very short kind of 5-minute introduction to my work. Some of these past presentations had artist talks. This will kind of contextualize the reading, and then the reading takes about a half hour. So let's see if this works. It worked before. But now, of course, here it is. Okay. There. So can everybody see that? Can you hear? Is all good? Okay. Excellent. So over a dozen years ago, I started working. I had an opportunity to do an exhibition in my community in San Diego. And I thought that I would talk about the future impacts of climate change, but I realized that climate change was happening now. And in San Diego, we had two huge conflagrations in 2003 and 2007, followed by invasion, if you want to call it that, of gold-spotted oak borers from Arizona that were killing the oaks. So I created this exhibit called Cascading Memorials in 2012. And I wanted to create a series of memorials to places that have been impacted by urbanization, globalization in the form of imported species like the oak borer, and climate change. And I was particularly concerned about providing a place to grieve and public places to grieve, because I felt like it was so important that we really can't have change unless we acknowledge this publicly. So after that point, I started developing a relationship with some of those places, including Pine Valley Creek, which you see here, which despite its name is actually home to oaks. So I would go back initially, I would honor the land by creating these photo montages every year. And what I was trying to do was to combine a series of glimpses, showing a variety of perspectives. To me, this was really embodied the vitality of the land as opposed to the heroic sublime that is so common to landscape photography, but I find actually quite distancing. Just to keep going, as you can see here, I was following the process of decomposition, honoring it over time, and committed to return and bear witness. And as the pandemic started, I also started writing about my experiences and really listening to what the land was saying, what needed to be said. And I also brought others to grieve with me and honor the land. Starting really a decade ago, I started moving north and eventually you'll hear east. One of the places I went was to the Sierras. While I was here, I didn't know that the sequoias were already burning to the south. 2 years later, 13 to 19% of all sequoias had been killed in flames. But fire, after fire, there's incredible regeneration. This is the same place 2 years later. If you look closely in the screen, these little bushes here are all sequoia seedlings. So with that brief introduction, I'd like to take you on a walk on the Shanahan Trail. This is in Boulder, Colorado. In 2022, I was really fortunate to have a fellowship at Naropa University. And one of the things I started doing there was walking in the Front Range, and in particular on this one trail where the city was engaged in what they call fire mitigation, which is trying to do things to prevent fire. And I ended up developing a series of conversations with one tree along the trail. Also, you'll hear referred in this piece, there was a small fire right nearby. It's called the NCAR fire because it was right near NCAR, which is the National Center for Atmospheric Research. And you'll also hear references to the Marshall Fire, which is a larger fire that burned in the plains right below the city of Boulder. So I'll be reading excerpts from a longer piece. This all came together in the last minute. So there won't be a whole lot of visuals, but I think it's good to sit and just be penetrated by the image. So thank you, Bodies and Borders, Ecologies of Consent. The title just seems so juicy of this exhibition and appropriate for what I'm about to share. So here goes, and hopefully it will work. Yes. August 9th, 2022. Dearest tree, your yellow band has caught my eye and drawn me to you. I stand beneath the shelter of your branches, feeling your presence, slowly reaching out to touch the band oozing with sticky sap, trying to synchronize my breath with yours. But the girdle all the way around your trunk prevents your flow. Oh, tree, I am so sorry. Your needles are so green. This will be a slow death. The girdle around your trunk has sliced through your veins, your phloem, so that the sugars that you create through the process of photosynthesis can't flow down to your roots, nor can your nutrients flow up from your roots to support your new growth. Instead, your sap is dribbling down your trunk, your bark encrusted with your blood. There is no tourniquet to apply to this wound. You'll bleed slowly until you die. Oh, dear tree, may I weep with you? Your girdle is part of the strategy the foresters used to prevent the conflagrations that are killing your kin. They have felled some of your neighbors, but chose you for a slow death, so that you will remain standing for years as a snag. If only this time would give you a chance to share your riches, your carbon, through the mycelial connection in your roots that binds you with your fellows. However, the girdling of your trunk has stopped the flow. Maybe it's my own projection that sap encrusting your trunk feels like tears, but I know that in your own way, you feel. Indigenous people have always known what Western science denied until recently. It is easier to cut you down without realizing that along with the fungal symbionts entwined in your roots, you sense, hear, touch, perhaps even see. But now your veins have been severed. Sensations from limb can no longer reach your roots, nor can your roots communicate with your limbs. Even if I don't have an alternative to offer as to how you are being treated, I think it is important to recognize the violence of severing connections. I want to offer my sincere gratitude for all that you have and will endure as you continue to serve your community, as you remain standing, shedding your needles, your small branches, and then your larger limbs, all the while providing homes for birds and small mammals, a storage place for pine nuts, and more. Even when you fall, other mammals or reptiles will gather shelter. Your log will hold moisture, gradually decomposing and returning nutrients to the soil. So yes, perhaps I judge too quickly. Taking the long view, your relationship to your surroundings will remain intact. But can your harsh treatment remedy the mindfulness wrought by settler colonialism, the mindlessness that permits indiscriminate rupturing of connections, the continuing extraction of riches, the indiscriminate dumping of the leftovers without ever stopping to think about the consequences to the earth, the water, and the climate? Tree, your girdle haunts me. Thank you for providing me a space to feel into that pain, that aching grief, and touch the vulnerability of my tender heart. April 25th. Dear Tree, meet Emily and Anne. Emily was at least with us earlier. I am grateful to visit you again. How are you doing? Your green foliage looks fully alive. I've now learned that despite the freshness of your wound, you were not girdled recently, but last November. The process of life and death are so much slower in trees. Walking this trail, I see all that the foresters have done. They are thinning trees, leaving clumps of trees interspersed with small meadows to reconstruct the look inscribed in the photographs taken by early settlers. We counted the rings on one of the stumps. The tree was 113 or 114 years old. By human terms, a good lifetime. For a ponderosa, quite short. At the turn of the last century in 1900, likely shortly before your birth, the population of Boulder was only 6,000. Now the population has grown by almost 100,000 people. You have witnessed such rapid change through your lifetimes. The temperature in Colorado has warmed by 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit in the last 50 years. Maybe it's merciful that you're dying when you are. Today, Emily, Ann, and I ventured off the main trail to sit in meditation, sharing the compassion with trees that burned in the small NCAR fire. The periphery of the burn area was very much coming back to life, the black ashes covered by a carpet of green. Moving inward, the fire burned hotter, singeing the needles of most pines, although some still had greenery on their uppermost branches. We sat in the charnel ground, a very rocky area of steep slopes, where the trees were never thin and the fire reached their crowns, reducing them to black skeletons. We sat next to a small weeping tree, its sap dripping down the charred bark. Foresters suggested that this fire was very much like the prescribed burns, or the fires, whether natural or human-made, that occurred before the European settlers suppressed them. Dear tree, sitting on steep slopes, we had a splendid view of the city of Boulder, houses like boxes tucked along evergreen green and deciduous gray, reservoirs glistening blue, an old power plant rising in the distance. In one moment, the fire felt like the universe's big no, mighty and wrathful in its destructiveness. In another moment, it felt like a cleansing, an opportunity, or a demand to start fresh. Tree, what is fire asking of us? What human habits need to change so that you can live, so that we all can live? Scientists tell us that there have been more days of extreme fire danger in the first 4 months of this year than in any previous year. A Boulder forester describes the relentless stress of fighting 5 fires during this record-breaking dry April. It is not easy to sit in a burnt forest, but tree, unless we are willing to feel into the suffering, we cannot come in relationship with you and with the forest. Thank you for listening. April 28th. I circle around you and offer pumpkin seeds. May I touch you? May I touch your wound, your girdle? May I stand with you? May we try to breathe together as we have on previous visits? Oh, tree, I realize that I reached out to you instinctively, appalled by the gash around your trunk, the depth of the cut. I wanted to palpably share my presence, my heart. Touch seemed like a more plausible form of communication than words. But I realize now that although I approached slowly, I never asked permission. I never stopped long enough to fully drop my projections of what you might be feeling and fully sense into your presence. I reached out not to feel the roughness of your bark, your toughness that protects you from the elements or from the harm that another being might cause, but to touch your naked interior. Do I have a right to touch? Are my fingers soft and tender on your yellow flesh, or are they causing further pain, violating a part of your being that was never meant to be touched? Oh, tree, what habits give me the privilege to touch without asking permission first? I profess to touch in caring concern, but is that how you receive the content? Is my proclamation of love too facile? How do I build relationship? You can stand here always present. You have no ability to turn away. You cannot run or hide or reach out to touch back. Yet you leave an imprint. Your sap is sticky. As I withdraw my hand, my fingers stick together, stained with your tap, a stain that lingers, that is not easy to wash off. Closing my hands in on themselves, I feel a certain relief. Asking permission means not only touching your rawness, but my own. Oh, tree, I cannot know what you're feeling, but I know the violation of unwanted touch. Dear tree, I am so sorry. I did not mean to cause you pain. But that's too easy. Can I take those words back? Professions of ignorant innocence only cause more pain. Did anyone really mean to get us into a situation where every year is hotter than the one before, where every year more beings wilt from a myriad of fevers? Oh, tree, I cannot know what you feel. Even as I ask permission to touch your wound, I am not sure whether to touch that subtle shift in energy I feel as I open to your energy field, that's indeed permission to touch. Can I believe what I sense? From childhood, I have been taught not to trust the haptic. Touch was unscientific, and too often professions of gentleness and care foreshadowed a touch that only brought me more pain. But risking touch is the only way to possibly come into relationship with you, a relationship demanding different ways of knowing. My fingertips quiver, although the lemon yellow of your girdled flesh appeared soft to my eyes. I am now stuck to your hard, impenetrable wood. How can I feel into this solidity? If I pull hard enough, my hand separates from your wound. Looking at my upturned palm, I see stains of our relationship. This is the hand that reached out to touch you. Yet this hand, this human hand, is responsible for your wound. Dear tree, it's also sticky. It is challenging to stay present. Nevertheless, I am so grateful to be able to stand with you today, to have touched you, to have been touched by you, to continue to labor in the uncertainty of our precarious relationship, and to be mindful of all the ways in which my fingers will stain whatever I touch next. July 14th, 2024. Girdle tree, or tree with the golden rings. Is it disrespectful or romanticizing you to call you that? Girdled tree doesn't feel like a proper name. I've been excited at the thought of seeing you again, but worried about what I would feel. Would I even be able to find you? I was heartened to hear Emily's report a year ago that your needles were all green. It turns out that you have secrets, channels deep inside you that are not destroyed by girdling. Dare I admit to hoping that you were still alive, defying the forester's best intentions. If you could live for a year, then why not many more? Only in Boulder, Colorado, can I take a city bus to the trailhead, a bus that runs regularly even on Sundays. At the trailhead, I stop to make offerings, so grateful to be here again. Finally, I pass the sign. Oh no. Oh, okay. Where this trail splits in two, and take the right fork. There you are. Your golden ring stands out against the brown trunks. So, too, do your brittle brown needles. You look so threadbare. I am so sorry. There was only so long that you could defy gravity, maintain circulation of water and nutrients when most of the tissue housing your circulatory system was stripped away. Everything looks so different. The grass has grown tall along with the mullein. There are other girdled trees nearby, but I know the scrapes of the blade that cut off your bark, the pattern of your ring of death. Before, when I touched you, my fingers stuck. Now your golden interior is fading to brown. Your sap has dried into a hardened crust. Oh, tree, I am so sorry. I hope that despite the girdle, during these past 2 years, you were able to move energy from your needles to the ground and the roots and to your neighbors. Or was it the other way around? Did your neighbors sense your distress and try to save you for as long as they could? Tree, I've sprinkled some pumpkin seeds at your base, but that hardly feels sufficient. What can I offer you? May I touch you? We have communicated this way before. I will be gentle. Maybe it doesn't matter. Your wound has hardened. Can you still feel my touch? I will wait till I sense permission. Can you feel my touch? Death feels soft and cold, but our relationship feels as sticky as ever. I come to you after a week sitting with the Ponderosas in CEPA, the Black Hills, during a Zen Peacemakers Bearing Witness retreat with the Lakota. Early in the morning, I would sit with a young Ponderosa near many small trees that had been felled to thin the forest. Then I joined the circle, shaded by the branches of your fellows, to listen to Lakota elders and some of their grown children. We sat in land sacred to their people, beginning each morning with prayers in Lakota, a language that the younger generation and even some of the elders struggle to learn. One of the elders described her experience as a child who was told that she had to sit by a creek until she could hear the cottonwood leaves arguing with each other, until she could hear not only the leaves, but the birds and the fish speaking Lakota. I wish that I had a grandmother who taught me how to listen to trees. My grandmothers grew up in another world. One loved to tell the story of the day the horse got loose when she was alone in a horse and buggy. But she never spoke about talking with trees. The elder who shared the story told me that her grandson had been able to speak Lakota fluently, but that once he started school, she spoke to him in English. If the trees in CEPA speak Lakota, what happens if nobody understands their language? Dear tree, did the Lakota ever speak to your ancestors? The City of Boulder websites list the Oseti Saoquin, the Sioux, among the people who traversed, lived, and stewarded the lands now known as Boulder. They also acknowledged the Sand Creek Massacre in 1864, when a peaceful camp of Setsihihi Tahesi, Cheyenne, and Hinoitin, Arapaho, were brutally murdered by Boulder residents. Last week, I listened to similar stories at Wounded Knee and about Wounded Knee and all that followed. Family separations, the priest that abused children at mission schools, even after they were no longer forcibly removed from their homes. Alcohol, fentanyl, the struggle to follow the red path. It is a testament to the fortitude and courage that anyone can speak the Lakota language. I asked you to touch you, wanting to share my presence, thinking that even in death, my hand might offer comfort. I said I would be gentle, but my hand is stained. Your sap may be caked dry, but my hand is stained before it reaches out to touch you. The last day of the retreat, we were asked what we felt after hearing the stories of Wounded Knee. I responded that I too grew up with stories of people pushed into pits and slaughtered. I too grew up not knowing my grandmother's first language. I was told that the languages I was learning were more important. But now, my people are killing another, decimating another, destroying cities and villages, killing horrendous numbers of women and children in the name of self-defense, but all out of proportion to what was done to them. I thought we had learned never again. I often repeat the story of a cousin, the eldest daughter of a father who was found just barely alive in a pile of bodies, the Germans having missed him when they shot everyone at the end of the war, pondering how this trauma led her to become a settler, to think that she had sole rights to the land. I wondered if her determination to defend herself made her blind to the suffering of others. But my hand, too, is stained. Last week, I worried about what benefit it could bring, just sitting and listening. So many are hungry for indigenous wisdom, but the culture in which I live continues to destroy the language of their stories. I tried to listen without expectation, to trust the choice that the tellers made in sharing what they choose to share. Could listening be part of a process of bringing their stories back to life in a language that we both speak? Could listening be part of learning to understand you? Even if you no longer feel my touch, I continue to be touched by you. I offer my open hands. I am glad that you are surrounded by mullein, living trees, squirrels, and woodpeckers who will continue to appreciate your presence. I will continue to come and listen. I will return in a couple of days with the friends you met 2 years ago. July 16th, 2024. Tree with the golden ring. Emily and Anne are with me. Anne says that she still feels ghost rings, bits of your energy emanating outward. I think I feel that too. Before we visited you, we continued up the mountainside to the place where the NCAR fire burned, just as we had 2 years ago. The forest looked both the same and different. In the steepest places, we recognized many of the rocks. Where the trees had only been singed, one would hardly know there had been a fire. When the fire killed the trees, the ground was covered with greenery, grasses, sagebrush, thistles, and more. Even the yuccas were coming back to life, but we didn't yet see any pine seedlings. We came to a place near where we had sat before. It all felt very peaceful, even if we were sitting among skeletons. Anne felt that all the trees' energy had moved below ground. Their trunks and branches, twisted as if twirled by the wind, were left behind as decorations that would gradually fall, returning to the earth to make new soil. We sat and we chanted as we visualized ourselves as Tara, white with 7 eyes, sharing and receiving compassion in all directions. Om Tare Tu Ture Swaha. Om Tare Tu Ture Swaha. That this forest will return, this forest will burn again. Fire is part of the cycle of life and death of the forest. We were also singing for the much larger burned area lying before us, downslope, just out of view. Maybe Emily and Anne, who live here and know this land better than I, could see it. 2 years ago, I told you about the Naropa University faculty members who took me to their home, destroyed by the Marshall Fire. But I didn't tell you what I saw when they drove me through the communities of Louisville and Superior. Whole neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. Piles of concrete and metal marking where homes once stood were surrounded by charred, naked trees. Huge buildings, including a Tesla dealership, a hotel, even part of a shopping center had been burned. On a separate trip, I went to an unincorporated area of Boulder County where I had once visited a Buddhist teacher with whom I had studied. He had sold his stately new home before the fire, but I wanted to see it. All that was left was a wrought iron gate, some of the foundation, and a bit of a brick wall. In what had been the front yard, the grass was green, and yellow tulips were blooming. Just like the forest, in these grasslands, life was returning after the fire. The only photographs I took of the Marshall Fire were of the Naropa professors standing in front of an apricot tree, their one tree that had survived. FEMA had plans to remove the rubble that was once their neighborhood a short time after I visited. They planned to remove everything, not only the metal and concrete, but all the trees and a few inches of topsoil. Heavy metals, toxic chemicals, asbestos. When the once vibrant neighborhoods combusted, these hidden demons formed a toxic stew. Metals and concrete would be recycled when possible, but the rest placed in a specifically designed landfill. The yellow tulips, along with all the buds and grass that had brightened the rubble during our drive, would be carted off. The Naropa professors told me later that after repeated attempts, they had successfully persuaded the contractors not to remove their apricot tree. But yesterday, I learned that the apricot had died 6 months later. At least they had been able to give their tree a proper burial. That meant a lot to them. What of the yellow tulips who had become so toxic that they needed to be carried away? After the fire, volunteers came from an organization dedicated to help people shift through the rubble from mementos of their past. The Naropa professors had found a few pieces of silverware and a Buddhist statue, but they couldn't keep the flower bulbs in the gardens they had worked so hard to build. How can people heal? How can the land heal when everything is swept away and buried in a place where no one can even come and visit? That our chants invoking Tara's compassion reach the land where trees and flowers once grew, and the hearts of those who live there. Thank you for listening. Tree with the golden ring. Your life has been cut short so that others may thrive. At least you are still literally in your home. Tree, I don't know the words to adequately thank you for the sacrifice of your life. Can humans right the wrongs that I've been describing to you? Can those of us new to these lands learn how to care for you? What does care mean in these times? Trees with the golden ring. Only now do I realize the cruel irony of the name I chose. The quest for golden rings for more and more transform the forest. Certainly any healing must start with deep interrogation of the suffering caused by this endless search. Let us circle around you one last time. My visit has gone by so quickly. I will miss you, but I am forever stuck to you as you are to me. This conversation must continue. I will try to honor your sacrifice with my words, images, and deeds. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your presence. And thank you, everyone, for coming.
That was incredibly powerful. Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
powerful and sad.
Leah, do you want to lead the next part?
Yes. Oh,
So thank you, Ruth. That was
yes. Thank you. That was incredible. I have to say, I haven't had the like pleasure of really hearing someone speak about trees and relationship and touch and ecology in the way that you do it. Thank you so much. It feels like the internal voice I've had in the forest when I'm also communing with trees and the environment. So thank you for sharing your work. And I'm going to look at our chat here. We have a few questions here in the gallery space, but I also really want to take time and honor everybody's questions. So also, if now is maybe a good time for people to turn their cameras on if they're comfortable, just so we can celebrate and support Ruth Wallen and give her that FaceTime. And if you want, I think we could round robin it and ask questions, raise hands, ask questions. Also, if you want to put something in the chat, if you're more comfortable doing that, myself, Mary, I'm sure, and Deanna can make sure we address those and get your questions out. So maybe we just start from there. Ruth, thank you so much. It was very heartfelt.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, maybe let's start with a gallery. It would be fun for those of us online to meet some of the Georgia.
Yes, okay, yes, I will have questions. Whoever wants to go first. Thoughts, questions? Okay. I mean, I have a few, but I'm going to keep mine to the very end if we have time. Okay. And just anyone also on virtual, just say your name, introduce where you're from, and then yeah, ask your questions. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Penelope. I live here in Chickamauga. And Ruth, I just want to say I've really connected with what you had to say. Whenever I'm around really old trees, I think about what could they tell me? What could they say to me? But I've not been able to voice it the way that you do. I was curious if you've ever heard of Joyce Kilmer Forest here in the North Carolina area. Have you ever heard of that forest?
No, I have been to the Smokies in North Carolina, but like 50 years ago. So I'm not very familiar with that part of the country.
Well, that is a place where, in North Carolina, where they were logging, but when the loggers themselves went into that forest, they refused to log it because the trees were just so huge. They're like the tallest, and they're so large that like 5 or 6 adults can't put their arms around them. So I've never had the chance to go to California and see the great trees there, but that forest reminds me of it, and I really connected with what you were saying about the trees out there. I really love your work. It's awesome.
Thank you
So
so much.
I appreciate how you express your relationship with trees because I feel that myself.
Thank you.
And I was curious if you base your information on science or just what you feel about trees.
It's very much both. I mean, I actually had to do a lot of research to find out why after like after the tree's girdled. I mean, I have taken plant physiology umpteen years ago in college, like why it survives for 2 years. And like there's something called axial tracheids that deep in the tree. So I very much do both. And even in terms of the whole huge debate about what you do to try to mitigate severe fires in urban rural interfaces. Yeah, there's it's both. But I don't, there's multiple ways of knowing, and they're all important.
Right. And so like here, Atlanta is close by and I've lived near there and they call that the city amongst the trees because you often as you go to Atlanta, you will see it's just encompassed by trees. So you see that as you approach. And I also know like Chattanooga, where we're close to, has a lot of trees. So I've always been fascinated by trees and I always just thought it was my emotions, but it's good to kind of know that there's also science behind how the trees connect to us.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you have any of the science to share that helps me understand why I connect to trees that way.
Actually, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, anyway, I'll just jump in and answer your question. I thought you were finished, but there's a little lag. So if at the beginning I mentioned this thing about mycelial connections. So some of you may have read the book The Mother Tree by Suzanne Simard, which is quite well known. And what scientists are learning now is that trees are connected with fungi called and they have these mycorrhizal connections, and they communicate with each other and they share nutrients through these mycorrhizae. So that's what I was talking about in the beginning, was that when the tree's girdled, could the nutrients still get down to share, or could they get back up? And normally what happens when a tree dies, it's dying, is that it will share its nutrients with other trees. But on the other hand, other trees may share their nutrients with the dying tree, depending on the situation, to try to keep it alive longer. There are some trees that are stumps that still have little growth, like
Oh yeah.
decades or hundreds, which is from the mycorrhizal connection. So all of that science is also really important.
Well, if you get the chance, or you're interested, that forest in North Carolina was named after Joyce Kilmer. He wrote a poem about trees. He was a soldier from like 1914 in that time period, and he wrote this beautiful poem about trees. And then that forest, they named it after him based on his poem. So if you ever look into it, it's a beautiful forest. But thank you so much for your contribution and sharing what you feel and know about trees.
Thank you.
Okay. As anyone else virtually just like ready to go? I mean, I want to be mindful. I feel like the last few times the people physically may have taken up a lot of time. So.
Go for it, Leah.
Okay. We have our resident biologist here. So we're gonna let him geek out for a second and then I will open it up for everyone else and then we can visit back to others if we have time. Introduce yourself fully.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tom, and I am a biologist. I'm more of a fish person. Ruth, I took a plant morph class that was one of the most fascinating classes I've ever taken, and that's when I realized that wasn't the direction I needed to go. It was the fish worked for me. The plants were harder. So my question is, in your work, I've read articles. I'm fascinated. We think of the trees and things as being individual, but they're really not in a lot of cases. And can you, with all the work you've done, can you speak at all to the communication and how they work together and form networks? I've read a little bit about that, and I really don't know much.
There's so much that I could say, and there's so much that I'm learning. But one of the kind of studies that's now become quite well known from, or one of the was from Suzanne Simard's work, for instance, was that birch and Douglas fir share nutrients, and that at different times of the year they share nutrients, like it goes one way or the other way depending on which tree is photosynthesizing more, and that they also, the birch shares some protection for the Douglas fir against disease. And trees also, they don't just communicate via their mycorrhizae, they also communicate via pheromones, via scent.
Mhm.
The reason that I mentioned this particular case is I work the most in California and am looking now a lot and in the sequoias and what happens after fire. And so often there's this idea that the first growth that comes up, which are bushes, ceanothus and something called bear clover, which is not a clover, it's in the rose family, but anything that comes up right after fire is going to be a nitrogen fixer, because that's a nutrient that plants need. You know this, but some other people may not. And nitrogen is combusted in fire. So, but what the Forest Service EIRs, and this is, they want to chop all that down, spray Roundup, because it competes with the trees that they want to plant. But then I ask, is that a limited view? Like these plants are also there because they control erosion and they provide vital nutrients to the soil. So I feel like we're in a place right now that we're just really beginning to understand networks. And we're just really beginning to understand that if you care about trees, you have to care about soil, and you have to start with the soil. So I hope that's with response to your question.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And it's, it reminds me of how complicated and beautiful the whole structure is and how it works together. And when you start managing one thing, you're impacting so many other things you have no idea about, or maybe you do know and you're showing disregard. I don't know. It depends on the case, I suppose, but it all is so connected. It's fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Somebody online have some comments or questions?
Well, I don't know if you can hear me. My husband has the TV on in the next room. The doors are closed and I can hear it, but you can hear me okay?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Ruth knows I live right next to, I live in the Ponderosa Pine Forest in Prescott, and we're at the lower end of the range of Ponderosa Pine in Arizona. And I had told you about how there was a prescribed burn 8 years ago following thinning, and finally this year I was walking around and I was seeing for the first time seeing young ponderosa pine trees, tiny little seedlings. Well, I just went for a walk in the woods today and found that the Forest Service had gone back and kind of masticated the area, all the low growth, and at the same time took their machinery and their big tire prints, scarred the soil. And there were maybe two places, not that I was looking all the time, but that I saw some little ponderosa pine seedlings that survived, but in a large area, every place they went, they're gone now. And anyway, that was upsetting. And the prescribed burn, I wondered about the girdlings selecting which tree is going to be a snag, because it seems like trees die and they become snags. And you could let the ones that survive and let the snags happen naturally. In the prescribed burn, there was an area where it got too hot. And some trees that had been left behind in the thinning were killed 8 years ago. And so there are a lot of snags in the forest I walk through, or at least in that part. Anyway, that's my latest news from my ponderosa pine forest, and I wish it were better. But what do you, when you talk about the soil and everything else that feeds into growing trees, and when you're going through and taking big machinery and stirring everything up, you might provide some places for seeds to settle and germinate, but then if you go through, because it's near a neighborhood, if you go through and you chew it up every 8 years, you're not going to get any regeneration. So, anyway.
Yeah, all the microbial life that is actually just
Yeah,
networked and entangled. You just chucked all of those apart, and that's so critical.
yeah,
Crazy, unbelievable.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I'm curious, Joanne, I hope you can talk to the Forest Service and ask them why they did it. But oftentimes the idea is that, well, we'll just replant. But of course, there's no acknowledgement for the seed bank that's there. But unfortunately, that's what I'm seeing in California, and it's I'm not sure what infuriating. I'll just use frustrating, heartbreaking. Not to use the seeds from the place because there's problems with bringing in seeds from somewhere else, and they may not be adapted to the same conditions. And
yeah, I don't think they have any plans on replanting. It's, it was selective thinning, and places where more of the trees burned. But yeah, I don't think they're going in there and planting. They were just wanted to create a more dispersed forest, which is how things were in Arizona before fires were suppressed. And so.
so I see that Mary is asking about suggested readings.
Yeah,
So-
I've read Susan Simard's books, and just curious what else you'd suggest.
Well, one book that just came out recently that's gorgeous, which is more about, it's called The Light Eaters. It's a wonderful book about all the sentience of plants. And I'm trying to think what else.
Could you spell that? I'm typing it into the chat for people.
I already did.
She already did.
Oh, the
There's
light
a
eaters.
subtitle too, but that's the first one that comes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the other book I wanted to mention that I talk about in the whole presentation, which is a little longer than this, is The Big Burn, Teddy Roosevelt and the Fire That Saved America, that will kind of give you the firefighter's perspective on why you need to not suppress fire. And then I could give you Chad Hansen, but I'll type that one in.
Okay, great.
The other thing I think is I'd love to hear if you have a ritual or routine way of spending time with trees that you practice. Any trees that you observe over time or in close relationship with. Well, obviously the tree that I think you were in and out, but the tree the skirtled tree, I'm in a relationship with. But I say the first thing that I think is important, I used to just kind of barrel along a trail and start hiking. And now I'll have to type when I'm not trying to talk. I always start with giving offerings. And I think that that's really important. So I'll offer to the four directions. I'll offer to the earth below and the sky above. offer to the spirits. And I have either a particular prayer I use or I just whatever comes to my heart as I face every direction. And either offer tobacco, which is a traditional offering, or pumpkin seeds. And I think that that is so important because doing that starts by creating relationship. Thank you so much for that question, Leah.
Lori Polson has a question.
Okay, but so I hope that, and the other thing, just to answer the last question before, is that I'm also doing, I do meditative practices with the trees, both Tonglen, which I could talk about, and White Tara, which I was singing from, which is just invoking compassionate energy, both in the environment and bringing, and so I need to stop talking. So let's listen to.
Take a sip. I think actually Tashi Tsertso's hand was up before mine.
Oh, all right.
Just throughout your whole talk, Ruth, it reminded me of how long I've had this connection to trees. And I must have been 4 or 5 years old when it started. And I think we sometimes overlook just the healing power of being amongst trees. And I once made my best friend drive us all the way from San Diego to Julian because I needed to hug a tree. and she did it. So, yeah, there is a lot of joy in the trees as well. That's all.
Tashi.
So, Ruth, I wanted to ask you, I don't know if it's the Marshall Fire or if it was an earlier fire that was close to Fort Collins or close to the Shambhala Center there, Drawla Mountain Center. I heard at the time that fire was so horrendous because the Forest Service had planted dense, uniform forest. So that's one question. And if that's not something you've looked into, no worries. And the other thing I had heard is that the Native Americans had traditions of burning small areas in order to maybe partly to let other smaller plants grow, but also I thought it was a kind of a forest management method. And I guess the third thing, I've heard that beavers are valued because they interrupt, they maintain channels that then act as a fire break. So I don't.
Okay, so thank you. I'll start with, so that fire that you're talking about was the Cameron Peak Fire. And the Marshall Fire was the most economically destructive fire because it burned in urban areas or suburban areas. The Cameron Peak Fire was the biggest fire, which burned this meditation center, Drawla Mountain Center, that a couple of us are familiar with. And I have been to that center post-fire, and kind of it's one of the areas that I'm watching regularly. I'm actually concerned, and this is true, that ponderosa pine, they take a while to come back, and it depends on the rainfall, and they haven't been coming back there yet, though the aspen really have. I hadn't heard anything about the story of, I mean, the Forest Service is always complaining that they have to thin because they had suppressed fire for so long. So I haven't heard that other story.
Maybe it was fire suppression and I just sort of confused it in my memory. Thank you for that.
So then I started to answer your second question, and then
the Native
I know
Americans.
what, yeah. So there's another book, but I can't think of the title at the moment, that I talk about in part. I don't think I said this, but I'm trying to take all of these readings and working on a book that will be Walking with Trees. And this book that I happened to come across, it was the only book that of all the list I had that was actually in the library. And it was written by an anthropologist in Boulder, actually, in the 1950s. And it looked at all the literature all across the country of native use of fire. And the thesis was that indigenous peoples used fire extensively, often to clear areas for then things we grow that are useful for harvesting and also for wildlife. And that they did this, that the forest had actually adapted along with indigenous burning. So the interesting thing was that this book wasn't published until 2000 or slightly thereafter. And the anthropologist who tried so hard to get it published had long since passed on. But it had an introduction by both a biologist and an anthropologist. And the biologist talked about the resistance to publishing it because there was this idea of kind of like climax forest. And whereas what the indigenous practices would do is they would get the forest to go back to earlier successional stages. And that idea has been somewhat discredited now, this idea of like a steady state climax. And the anthropologist wrote about the fact that it wasn't published because of the prejudices against indigenous people, that they couldn't have been that, quote, intelligent to have developed these practices. So this is a long-winded answer, but it really, I mean, I think speaks directly to what you're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I hadn't heard actually, I don't know enough about the beavers, but yes, that sounds correct.
Yeah, so then when beavers were suppressed, because of all the reasons, that then forests were allowed to be more dense, which created a greater fire hazard.
Right. And I will say that at Trawler Mountain Center, they have grants now to try to restore the beaver habitat in the creeks.
Oh, far out. Thank you.
Leah, do we have any more speakers in the gallery?
Yes.
Theresa is wanting to speak.
I was Ruth. I was in everyone. I attended a presentation on eco dharma, and the presenter talked about how the final gesture of the Buddha's enlightenment was touching Mother Earth. So his enlightenment was dependent on that connection with Mother Earth and the feminine principle. And I wonder, with the trees themselves, a lot of times my favorite trees feel feminine. Maybe it's the way they lilt up to the sky. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, gender is very different in plants because many plants have both male and female parts, and some plants are male or female, and they usually have something so that they don't self-pollinate. So I don't, there's a whole cultural tradition of equating the feminine with the natural and the masculine with culture. So I think there, you could argue from a Buddhist standpoint that there are feminist principles, feminine principles, excuse me, but I think that trees embody both the feminine and the masculine.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ruth, was it accurate when I was saying that each of the images that focused on the girdle had overlays? Yeah, thank you. So beautiful.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, I I once again really enjoy your montage approach. I think it's so, I was just yesterday taking a walk in the woods and I was like, there's just no, this photo that I'm taking just looks so prosaic, right? It's like, okay, another nice view, but you've really nailed it with your collage approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the overlays are a little different than the collages, but it's just the feeling. I'm trying to get a sense of the feeling sense.
They have more a sense of how things change from instant to instant, as well as over long periods of time. More of the way that we actually experience things, which is in lots and lots of drifting images, overlapping imagery. So I feel like they're alive.
Thank you.
I think we're in a good spot on my end. We do have like a group question, just more about your materials and media choices and the practice, like what led you to how you're expressing your work now through your media and sound and poetry. Like, what was that journey like for you as an artist and creative, especially working in this intersection of data and biology and science? Just what was that journey like that led you to maybe materials that resonate with you more now?
I'm not sure if I can answer that in terms of materials, but I will say that my first major project as an artist was an artist in residence at the Exploratorium, which is a museum of art and science in San Francisco. I was really fortunate. In those days, I was the second woman artist in residence. We forget about how difficult it was. But I'm mentioning this because I put wood in the San Francisco Bay, and I was watching the growth on the wood over the time and photographing it. And I went to the Exploratorium with this project, and they said, "We like the way you talk about it." And I was like, "But I make sculpture and painting. I don't talk. I'm not an actor." And then I realized that like they were considering me for an artist in residence, and I was young in my 20s. Maybe I better learn how to do performances. So there was a very active profeminist performance artist scene in the 80s, and which I got involved in. And then what I ended up doing there, I think in the tradition of boys, we were calling it performative lecture, which is why I called this a performative reading and then wondered if that made any sense. But anyway, I thank you for coming. So in a way, when I did those early ones, I mean, I was talking about the life in the Bay, and I had like slides, multi-image slideshows with dissolve units and tape recorders. This is all technology that doesn't exist now. Though at least, I mean, it's so strange how the PowerPoint worked just fine, and I couldn't see the arrow to know where to move it forward when, but anyway, so I think it's been a long evolution. I, for many years, worked more sculpturally or in terms of photo text work, and then the photo montage started around the same time as the Cascading Memorial piece, though I'd done an earlier piece called If Frogs Sicken and Die, What Will Happen to the Princes, which was all about looking at frogs as an indicator of, frogs are always anthropomorphized, but they're also an indicator of environmental malaise. So it's just kind of evolved, and I think the writing, owning the writing as a practice separate from the art really started with the pandemic. So I hope that answers.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for elaborating on that. And thank you for your talk. It's been really inspiring Yes, I don't know if we have any final questions from anyone else.
Before we do that, I just want to say thank you to you. I don't know that most people online, I mean, we've never met, but Leah did so amazing amount of work to organize all of these talks and to organize this exhibition. So I really want to give you thanks.
Absolutely, I can confirm that she has just been extraordinarily effective at promoting this. It was originally Leah's idea, this entire concept for the show, which of course got worked through the various processes that it takes WEAD. But it was just about a little bit more than a year ago. It takes us almost a year to put on these to put on these exhibits. So yeah, Leah especially deserves a call out. And if you haven't yet read her curator statement, little plug here, her curator statement and also Beverly Natus are both included in the catalog for the show.
And on our websites. But
along with Ruth,
all of you guys make everything worth it and easy. And this is like my dream baby. Like I see so many artists, like, and I, you know, some of the artists in this show, like I studied in grad school, and also just new discoveries as well. I think that it's beautiful that we're all coming together and talking about something that we have a real focus in, and a shared focus in. And I'm just so grateful. So Ruth, thank you. Like for real. Thank you.
Big shout out to Gallery 109 and Leah.
Thank you. And please
there'll be other presentations. So Thursdays and Saturdays will be more presentations, and you can learn about them on our website and get the links on the WEAD website, or you do have them also in Gallery 109 website.
and WEAD's Facebook pages, and I believe the Instagram as well. So whatever your favorite social media is.
Great.
Or just hunt me down. Okay. Just show up.
So thank you all for wonderful. Thank you, Ruth, for
Your work is
walking with us.
incredible.
And
Incredible.
a big round at the end. And
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you.
thank you. Thank
I
everybody
can't
for
wait for the
coming.
book.
Just
I
have
look
to
forward
read
to
what's in the chat, but thank you so much for coming.
all right. Officially close the recording. So